We got a very long response to one of the videos about the $10,000 to $15,000 home today by Yosef McGruber, and I'm going to read his response on the show and go through point by point his thoughts about moving to either Nicaragua or Ecuador, and we're just going to dig into this because there's a lot to go into here, and with a long response like this, it deserves a mention. I should say, though, if you're going to be making a long one like this, boy, I would love it if you guys made a video and sent it in. All the instructions are down in the show notes. There's no reason not to do it. It's a lot of fun. You get to be on the show, and it helps my community connect with each other. Also want to remind you, every Thursday we try to do a live stream in the afternoons, so it's a great way to connect with other people in the community in real time and see me talking even more than I do already. So we're going to get to Yosef's questions and comments right after the bump. No time like the present, let's dive right in. By the way, I'm Scott Allen Miller, and this is my everyday life living in Leon, Nicaragua. Today, Yosef writes, 1 hour ago. Today, Yosef writes, I do not think that $15,000 or $20,000 is enough for the type of house that I would love to have. I should spend somewhat more, but that is a really interesting problem to have. Latest figure I have heard is that I need $46,000 invested into a property to get my investment residency in Ecuador. I am not quite sure that I will get enough in Social Security in just a few more years when I am 62 to do the retirement visa. Often investment visas and retirement visas work in very different ways. One has to show continuous income, the other shows a bunch of money spent in country, but they do vary obviously by country. But if I could buy a decent place for $15,000 in Ecuador, and I don't know that $15,000 is an option in Ecuador, but I have heard that it should be, so I believe that you can do this from a is such a house available standpoint, then I would have to talk to the immigration lawyers to see what I can do to meet the requirements. Can I hire a reputable company to add on more rooms, or could I use the lawn space to just build another better house in front and use the place as a guest cabin or for extra storage space? I would love to have 2,000 square feet, as I'm an American who wants ample space for my stuff and projects. Now this is, and he's being reasonable, right? He understands that he's being American. He's keeping American trends and lifestyles and moving that with him, and that's going to cost him quite a bit more than if you move to an Ecuadorian or a Nicaraguan lifestyle. That's fine, nothing wrong with that, but it's an important thing to embrace and understand that when you're doing that, if you're an expat and you're wanting to simply live outside your home country, a lot of people want to bring those things with them and those lifestyles with them, and that's fine. And for other people, they often want to embrace the full lifestyle of the place that they're moving to and take full advantage of the way that people live there. For example, moving here to Nicaragua, of course, I have a lot of cameras, but I do a lot of stuff online. One of the things that we found really beneficial for us was being able to switch to shopping and owning things and storing things much more like Nicaraguans, and has made our lives much more lightweight and easy, and much lower cost. We do so much less shopping because we don't feel the need to fill our house with things. But a lot of Americans just have so much baggage mentally from that over a lifetime, or just enjoy certain things that it makes sense for them. It's just important to understand that that is a very optional thing, and a lot of expats do come down to places like Nicaragua and discover that they are completely able to change their lifestyles and actually really embrace it over a relatively short period of time. He continues, not to be all cramped with boxes stacked to the ceiling. Now I can say we moved down, I've been here for, 4 years continuous, family of 5, 2 dogs, and we brought 0 boxes, right? Just luggage. We were unpacked within a few hours. So this is not a problem that people necessarily have to have, and I really recommend that people seriously question why they're bringing so much stuff with them. Is that really something you should do? I've never in my life met a person who did that and didn't regret it. I'm not saying that you shouldn't do it. I'm not saying that you won't be the exception. I'm just saying that everyone thinks they're the exception. This falls into that. Everybody becomes impatient. Everybody just goes and looks online. Everyone believes they're the exception to every rule all the time. And so if you think you're the exception to the rule, chances are you're not. If you were the exception to the rule, you probably would think that you weren't and then find out you were wrong. That's far more likely. People who are truly the exception won't think they're the exception. Just the act of believing you are generally makes you not the exception. I would assemble, I actually own 10 utility shelf units, but only 5 are currently put together. I would assemble them all if I had the space and a proper permanent place to live. I want little or no maintenance, as I am not all that handy and I'm getting older. I really do not want to have to do projects that I do not understand, nor to go outside much if money permits, so I likely would hire a reliable gardener so that I can have a decent lawn without having to do much of anything myself. Of course, here in Nicaragua, typically you don't have lawns. That would actually be the exception, which of course you can. I have a lawn, right? But it is odd that I have a lawn. It's very unusual. Most people do not have gardeners and don't do lawn care. The whole idea of needing gardeners is not a normal thing in most of the world. He says, should I consider Nicaragua instead? Well, given some of the things he mentions, possibly simply from a financial perspective, right? Now, as Kevin pointed out, as other people have pointed out to me recently, it is not great to make your decisions about the country you're going to live in based on financial projections most of the time. You end up in a position of trying to be ridiculously cheap, and some people have to, so there are exceptions to whether you should do this or not. But so many people become addicted to being so incredibly cheap, and they forget just how impactful that super cheap may be. And in an example like this, and he hasn't said anything, like this is nothing about Yosef, but in his example, he's talking about spending all this extra money to keep extra boxes of things. And so on one side, he's being very like, there's lots of money, I can just, throw money around in ways that I wouldn't do. But in the other being like, how do I come up with housing that is cheap enough but still meets immigration requirements, right? Which those aren't the problems that I have to have. And so it's a very different mix of things for different people. But it's important to understand that most countries, one, are affordable. You really don't have this, there's only one country that I can afford kind of place. You really have a lot of options. Ecuador is one, but Nicaragua and Guatemala and El Salvador and Honduras and much of Mexico and bits of Panama and Colombia and Venezuela and Brazil and Argentina and maybe not Chile right now, and Paraguay for sure, maybe parts of Uruguay, definitely parts of Peru. Right, there's so many places just in the Western Hemisphere, just in Latin America, the Dominican Republic. Right, all these places are going to be affordable depending on where you go. All of them will have some place that's too expensive. All of them will have a place that's affordable, even on the most extreme budgets. Nicaragua will let you stretch your budget just a little bit farther than any of the others. But you're not looking at needing to pick and choose except for the most unbelievable extreme circumstances based on the cost. And so it really should be coming down far more to which place fits your vibe, fits your lifestyle, just offers the thing that you want. Maybe it's they have the right weather, maybe it's you want to be on the ocean, maybe you ruled out Bolivia because you want Pacific Ocean front and theirs is pretty crappy. They don't have any. Something like that. But it's tempting to use money as a driving factor because here in Nicaragua, we see that a lot because so many people come to Nicaragua because they feel cash strapped or they feel completely financially devastated, and Nicaragua lets them go the farthest on the money that they have, generally by a bit. Whereas if you're going to someplace a little bit more eclectic, just the tiniest bit more expensive, you're not choosing it based on money alone. Anyone who's choosing money alone is probably going to end up in Nicaragua. People who are basing it on their decisions as to where to go on a broader scope of things, certainly we get a lot of them here. We think, we think Nicaragua's a great choice, but there's an awful lot of other choices out there, so a lot of people are going to just naturally pick other ones, especially if you like, for example, big city living. Nicaragua doesn't offer that very much. He says, will it be easier to get my permanent residency? So probably, right? Nicaragua is about the easiest permanent residency that you can have. Ecuador's is certainly quite easy, so I don't know that it's easier, but it's at least equal. The requirements are quite a bit lower as far as I know, at least in investment, but you can't use your house as an investment. So it depends on how you're looking at it and what you want to do. But the nice thing about Nicaragua is that you have such an assurance that you're going to be able to stay that you don't have to worry about things like you do with other places. Now he says, I do not want to have the uncertainty of visa runs or anything like that. So you've got to be really clear. No matter what you do, you will have that uncertainty. The uncertainty does not come from doing border runs. That is a misconception. That is a myth that people who are scamming you on residency will promote, right? They say, oh, going to the border is scary. What if they don't let you back in? Okay. What if meteors hit? What if the dinosaurs rise from the grave and zombie dinosaurs take over, right? Or you can say what if about anything. And yes, it becomes scary because someone has been turned away at the border before. But people being turned away at the border are generally people who have committed crimes, right? And we expect that anywhere. The United States turns away all kinds of people at the border. That's not surprising, but we don't expect to be turned away at the border haphazardly. We expect it because something bad has happened, especially in a place like Nicaragua where they're so open and welcoming all the time. They're going through so much effort to get you to come and try them out. They're certainly not going to lackadaisically turn you away at the border. So if you're not doing something bad, you have nothing to worry about. So either this is a false concern or you're planning on being a criminal. I don't think that's the case. In which case, you've got more things to worry about than the border control. It's also very important to understand residency cannot, the term residency, by definition, does not provide any assurance whatsoever. There are no guarantees with residency. You are not a citizen. You do not have a passport. You are not represented by the government. You are potentially a long-term person allowed to stay. For example, you could have what's called temporary residency or short-term residency in many countries, and you can have long-term or permanent residency in many countries. But it's still residency, and no amount of calling it permanent makes it permanent, and no amount of it calling it residency makes it definite. You can be issued residency, but the government can take it away. Any government can take it away at any time. Now, only the government that gave you the residency. Of course, the Peruvian government can't take away your Nicaraguan residency. Nicaragua's government can't take away your Peruvian residency. You know what I mean. But whatever country you're in, that government can revoke your residency at the blink of an eye. They're under no obligation to maintain a residency just because they gave you paperwork for it. None whatsoever. So in many cases, you are equally protected with residency or border runs. Now, that doesn't mean that a border run is the right thing for you. Everyone has different needs, and generally, if you're going to live in a country, border runs are not normally available indefinitely. So you do need to plan for residency, and that's important. But it's also important to understand that the emotional desire to avoid border runs is generally a false one. There are some people who really struggle with border runs physically because of their health or their age or something like that. And I totally understand, but it's important to understand that residency has similar requirements, and sometimes those can be even worse, and people just ignore them, generally in the case of residency, and freak out about them when it comes to border runs, just because the name border run sounds scary, and the name residency sounds like you're getting some special protection. That's false, and people will try to make money from you by selling you on the concept and the support for doing residency. So look out, wherever you got that feeling that a border run is something to be worried about, probably there's someone trying to scam you behind the scenes. That doesn't mean you've been scammed, but probably you're getting information from people who are trying to push a narrative that makes you nervous, and that will lead you to a point where you're likely to spend money with somebody. So that's probably happening, because if you actually were aware of residency and border runs, you'd say, these are both just options, and I'm going to do whatever makes sense for me at the time. Most of us prefer the border runs here. That's important. I'm very proud of having a permanent residency now in the country that I love and choose to live in, but it's also a bit of a pain to get to, and I would have been happy doing border runs indefinitely. It's really not a big thing, and I live really far from the border. Not the farthest. Some people are really far from a border, and that makes it pretty onerous. So everybody has a different mix of what matters for them, but never is it really a big deal. Nor do I plan to ever move. This is following up on I don't want to do border runs. Nor do I plan to ever move once I get settled. When this leads towards residency, probably is going to be the right choice for you. But it's important just not to have fear of border runs, right? Fear of border runs is a primary driver for a lot of rash, reckless decision making. Don't let that happen to you. It might be nice to have neighbors who actually want a neighbor who is American and can speak fluent English. The problem is, can I speak fluent English? If they value that. Yes, in general, most neighborhoods, people will value having an American neighbor. It depends. If you're in a neighborhood with lots of American neighbors, they're not going to value another one in most cases. If your neighbors are all Americans, they're probably tired of all the Americans as well. But if you're going into a neighborhood that has basically no Americans, then you may bring a lot of value, partially because you are unlikely to impact their culture. That's a big deal that people may not be able to articulate really well, but it is very important that for a lot of people, if let's say you have, we'll just say a city block, and on a city block, I'm going to make this up, but let's just say that there are 24 homes on a city block, right? That's probably reasonable. That's, we're not going in a way that people necessarily hang out as far as a block, but you get the picture. Out of those 24 homes, if one of them is an American or Canadian or Brit or whatever, then you have 23 homes of consistent Nicaraguan culture and one foreigner who hopefully is looking to integrate at least to some degree and is going to pick up a lot of cultural characteristics from those other 23 neighbors and to some degree will keep to themselves and do their own thing as well. At that ratio, it is very unlikely that the American is going to create any real influence on the culture of the other people there. You're not going to make them start drinking a different, you're not going to start having them drink wine when they would have drank beer. They're not going to start going to American football games instead of the local soccer games. They're not going to stop eating hot dogs on the street just because you think that Kentucky Fried Chicken is better or whatever. things are going to remain consistent. You're not going to interrupt the local businesses or anything of the sort. So typically, in the right ratio, people really appreciate it because you do represent, in most cases, a higher income into the block, partially because you're bringing in foreign money rather than just recycling local money. Plus, you bring in, like you said, English speaking. The kids in the neighborhood will be appreciative of being able to hear proper English spoken. That's a big deal. And so generally, yes, an American neighbor, pretty much anywhere, is seen as a beneficial thing. As long as you don't have racism to deal with, which Nicaragua really doesn't have, it's pretty much a positive anywhere. Imagine where I grew up. I wish on my block there had been, I don't know, a Mexican family or a Nicaraguan family somewhere on the block that I could have actually heard Spanish from, and that I could have sit down and have a barbecue and ask them about their culture and learn things. That would have been amazing. That cultural interaction would have been wonderful for me as an American growing up in a very white, very homogenous zone of the United States. There would have been no negative to that. Having a foreign family bringing in their little view into another culture would have been incredibly beneficial to us, and no negatives. They wouldn't have in some way, negatively impacted our culture and gotten us to all stop, eating pizza and switch to gallo pinto every day. They would not have happened. We would have had gallo pinto once or twice a year as like a social thing with them, and we'd say, wow, this is a cool food. I like this the couple times I have it, right? But we would still go out. It wouldn't interrupt the businesses and such. So in both directions, you can see how easy it would be for that to be seen as a positive, as long as you're not in this American like fear of foreigners kind of thing, which is pretty unique to North America and Europe. Most of the world is pretty okay with a small number of foreigners. In this case, you're looking at being an immigrant, right? We talk about this a lot. Of course, you'll be an expat, but you're talking about never leaving again, which hopefully you will achieve the status of immigrant pretty quickly. But I would like to be around expats who can answer my questions, like, do I really need to report anything to the corrupt USA government about my finances if I never return to the has-been corrupt USA? I mean, most of these things we can answer online. I would be wary of talking to just your neighbors because they often won't know, especially as here in Nicaragua, most expats are not American. So you get a lot of Canadians who probably have very little knowledge of it. I mean, they might be able to research it for you, but other expats are not necessarily great resources. People get into a lot of trouble with that, especially if they're around a lot of expats. A lot of misinformation tends to swirl around, and even in our expat groups where there's loads of people who know stuff really well, we find people who have some pretty crazy ideas about how things work and have never gotten course correction from the other expats until recently, and so you gotta be careful with those things. It is nice to have other expats around. There will be things that go on in your life that you wish you could simply learn from someone who's done it before, from the same starting point as you, and that will be beneficial. But you're going to struggle to find a place in Nicaragua where there's no expats. That's pretty rare. If you're going to be in any of the major cities, there's going to be at least a few expats. There's going to be most of them: Managua, Leon, Granada, Rivas, Messiah, San Juan del Sur, of course. There's going to be loads of expats. You'll have no problem finding them. Even in Leon, where the city is big and the number of expats is relatively small, it's easy to go out on a Friday night and run into 20, 30, 40 expats that are there. Many of us are long-term immigrants that actually live here and have much deeper information in most cases. But you'll need people for questions like to the USA. You don't want to be asking expats. You want to be asking your American lawyer and your American accountant. They're the ones who matter. But the quick answer is absolutely. You have to report everything about your finances to the United States. By living abroad, you have absolutely no severing of ties with the United States. That does not happen. It can't happen. There's no reasonable way that could possibly happen. All of your stuff has to be reported. And if you start a business abroad, you must voluntarily report it. You must. The fines are huge. In the USA, having a more expensive home is just totally unrealistic due to getting eaten up by maintenance costs and high property taxes. Yeah, trust me. Hear you there, brother. But if I was to live somewhere where the property taxes are very low, then the bigger the better. That's to some degree, I suppose that is true. Here in Nicaragua, the lifestyle is not to keep buying more and more and have more space. One of the things you will find very quickly is if you have a large home, you can't ever get your value back out of it. I understand you're talking about a retirement place, but the question would be, why is so much bigger so much better? Of course, everyone thinks that before they come, and most people think it for the first 6 months. But once you've lived here, I know very few people, still some for sure, but very few who actually feel that way. We all start to want smaller and smaller homes, says the guy who has a 9-bedroom estate. However, It's important to understand that we're annoyed by certain aspects of this really large home. One of the reasons that we have it is because, one, we're 5 people living here, all of whom need their own rooms or space. Plus, I have offices and work from home, so does my business partners, and so we need a lot of space for different things. Plus, my children live here full time, and they go to school here, so they need a space for like their school and project space as well. Plus, we have crew that work in the house full time, so they just need space for all kinds of things, and we wish that there was a lot less living rooms and a lot more bathrooms. It could be better designed for the way that we live, but the point is that, it's too big, physically large, but we do need a lot of extra space. And it would be nice if my office was a little bit bigger because the studio is quite cramped in many situations. Especially if you watch my live stream, you can often see just how cramped it often is. But I think I'd be very careful assuming that bigger is better. Yes, your taxes are very low, but the smaller you go, the easier it is to resell, and the more you're likely to get your money out, and of course, the more money you have to live on. Now, if you have so much money that it doesn't matter at all, and spending $100,000 when you only needed to spend 40, or 200 when you only needed to spend 80, right? If you can do that and it doesn't matter at all, then by all means, it's your retirement. Get whatever makes sense for you. And if you can't sell it after you've passed on, who cares, right? Now it's just a large house that at some point someone's going to pay half price for. We see that all the time. We're currently talking to a place that used to list at 1.1 million, and we're wondering if it's worth 300K. That's a lot of money to have lost, but someone built something way too big and they couldn't justify it. We see this all the time. We've seen all kinds of big places that just can never sell because they built beyond the market. All right. I do not want to be near the beach. Trust me, it's probably a good choice. Since I hear that the salty air is bad on electronics. It's terrible. Also requiring more painting. Yep. I do not like open air, so maybe I'd be running a mini split somewhat, probably all the time. I understand that some mini splits are not just on off, but can ramp up their speed, performance high and low based on the current need, and that sounds very nice. I would say that nearly all work that way. Now, some of them are automatic, and they're going to judge everything based on how much they need, but keep in mind that mini splits typically are so overpowered for their environment. It's one of the reasons that they're so efficient, is that they never need to do that. They're basically going to take a room and take it from completely warm, and you haven't been running the mini split, you've been at the market or whatever. You come home, your room is 90 degrees, and you're like, 90? That's uncomfortable. Turn on your mini split, and the room is cool in, 3 minutes. That's pretty common, so rarely do you need anything more than just running the mini split for a few minutes. But let's say you're really hot, it's 100 outside, you're sweating, you're just not happy, you walk in, you turn on the mini split, and you're like, that's not enough. Most of them have a turbo button, and you just hit it manually because it's you that's hot, not the room. You go turbo, and it just whoo, and the room cools down in 1 minute. You can stand in front of it, and it's blowing your hair in the breeze, beard in the breeze, whatever, and you cool right down. I have yet to experience a mini split that doesn't do that. But I don't know any that do it automatically, and I'm not exactly sure how they would do it automatically because it's not the room that makes the need, but they will, that you can get them that swing to help circulate the air. You can turn the fan to different speeds. They're relatively flexible, and everything works from, I'm going to lean over, sorry for being out of, they all work from these little remotes that you use. Everybody's got these for every air conditioner here. It's just how life works. A lot of people mount them to the wall so they don't disappear. Providing a little cooling or heat. Trust me, you will never need to provide heat. Never once ever have we needed to provide heat. There's times where we wanted to close the windows maybe because it got a little bit chilly. There's times where we wanted to come in because it was too chilly outside, but never in a house have we experienced a day where we wanted to warm it up. Never. Not a thing. Yet hardly realize that it is even on. Yes, with many, like my mini split that's running right now, you don't hear it on the video. I don't notice it in the room. If I turn it off, I do go, okay, there's a little bit of sound that went away, but it's incredibly minor and very, very efficient. It says, I imagine that I will be learning my Spanish once I get there. Absolutely, you will most definitely be learning Spanish once you get here. But I would probably keep things like my computers and books, more so in English. Yeah, okay. Maybe even both if that's possible. Yeah, I mean, having a computer do both is tough because it's got to show you something. You don't want to see everything twice. Maybe I could order a copy in English and Spanish, meaning his books. I suppose. Now, most people move to electronic books when they move abroad just because owning paper books in the tropics, problem. Storing books in the tropics, problem. Everything goes bad. Everything invites insects, like not things you want to do. I suppose that Amazon now delivers the most anywhere in the world. So Amazon doesn't deliver, but you get Amazon anywhere in the world. So it's all in how you word it. We mentioned this the other day about the thing about residency. If you ask, do I need residency to stay long term in a country, people will say yes, because that's generally true. Not always, but generally. But if you ask, do I need to get residency before I go to this country so that I'll be able to stay later? They'll say, no, almost never do you need something like that. That would be a really weird assumption. So it's all in how you ask it. Does Amazon ship to Nicaragua? No, it only ships to the US. Oh, I can't get Amazon here? Oh, absolutely you can. Why would you assume just because they don't ship here that you can't get it? Oh, because Amazon doesn't do the final leg of the shipping. That's the trick, but it's very easy to have Amazon shipped here. I have an order coming right as we speak. All right, someone fired up a diesel engine just outside the window, so I apologize if you're listening to that. I know the microphone does pick it up when we do the live stream. People can hear every bird, every engine, every voice outside my window. How complicated would that be? This is Amazon anywhere in the world, especially since local stores may often lack the stuff that I need. It is incredibly easy. You simply give the address of your drop shipper in Florida, and you ship to there with your name on it, and they ship it to your house in Nicaragua. And often it is actually cheaper than buying it in the United States because there's some tax advantages, and the shipping is so cheap. Now, it will take a little bit longer to get to you. There are times you can rush it and pay more, but in general, while it's a little bit different, it is incredibly easy, and I've been placing Amazon orders all week. It's a completely normal thing to do. You don't need to worry about that at all. Some places won't deliver like that, but Amazon and all the places that I use, no problem whatsoever. I know my wife uses Shein, no problem. I use MPB, the camera company, no problem. It's very, very easy to have things shipped here, so not a concern at all. The little bit extra delay on orders and wanting to put orders together, so you get, you're not delivering like a little tiny box every time. We tend to wait until we have a few things. Maybe that's just us, but I find that makes me much more diligent and intentional in how I shop, and that it actually works out better for me rather than worse, because I want to own many fewer things than I used to. I don't want to get into the habit of just buying things. I want to break my habits from America, and it is helping me do that quite a lot. And I actually enjoy shopping a lot more and spend a lot less, and I like the things that I get a lot more. It's like I put in effort, and now when I get something, I'm like, I really meant to have this, and it has worked out well for me. How complicated would that be? That's the question. I often just order online what I need, other than groceries, which are simpler to just go and buy maybe around once a month. Yeah, doing an order once a month would be no big deal. Can I get packages delivered to my new home in some Latin American country without them getting stolen? I mean, people do this every day, right? It's how things work. It's not the United States. People are not stealing things left and right. Of course, we're also home a lot when we're living in Latin America, so how would it get stolen? I mean, you could just leave it outside, obviously, you could, but that's not normal. Here in Nicaragua, like I can't tell you how every country works. I don't order things at home just generically in every country, but here in Nicaragua, we just place our order, it comes in, and they either hold it for you at the shipping center, or they ship it directly to your house and hand it to you. So it's very easy to have your stuff and be very secure about it. I likely would be home most of the time. Okay, so that's easy, but I do not really go to that many places. Another reason I think to move would be if I find there is no longer the need to eat all at home all the time, if I can actually afford to eat at restaurants. Yes, for sure, at least here in Nicaragua and all the places I've been, Bolivia and Argentina and Mexico and Costa Rica. Costa Rica, not as much, but still better than the United States. Panama and Belize starts to get pretty much like the United States, but Guatemala, Honduras, El Salvador, all of them cheaper, if not way cheaper than being in the United States. He says, although I would still probably be having at least 2 refrigerators. So it's amazing how much, when I lived in the US, we only had 1 refrigerator, and now that we live abroad, we have 3. But we do find that we're going farther for groceries. We want to go to Managua, and we get big shipments of food and bring it in. So we've changed our pattern some, but in general, all that grocery buying and stuff has been relatively similar, but we do find that just the amount that we cook at home, because we do have a chef here in the house, is much higher. So we used to go out to eat quite a bit, and then we realized that having a cook in the house that can make healthier food at slightly lower cost was well worth it. So that's the direction that we went, and that led us to have 3 refrigerators because we're willing to go to Managua to get big shipments of cheaper food, and we're willing to cook at home most of the time, nearly all the time. We try to limit how much we go out to eat because it does cost more, even though it's not a lot. But we definitely can go out to eat much more easily, much more often than in the United States for much less money. So that has been very good. Overall, our food financial picture is dramatically better than it was before. So, Yosef, I hope that answers your questions. For anyone who has any, or for Yosef who has further questions, please get down in the comments, ask your questions. leave your comments, say hello, send in a video question. We love it when people do that. Go check the show notes for information on how to do that, along with how to join our WhatsApp group, all that kind of stuff, how to support the channel at buymeacoffee.com/ScottAlanMiller, how you can join the channel and become a member. That would be super awesome if people consider doing that. Join us for the Thursday live stream, of course, and as always, I will see all of you tomorrow.